The tagline I had in my mind was, what is the cost of being unyielding and what is the price of bending too much? And I wanted these two characters to have that contrast. You know, I would love to make a career as a writer. The pragmatics of the writing world is that it's hard to make that happen.
You aren't afraid of wading into hot button issues. Why I think it's important to be outspoken and have your voice heard.
Your vibe attracts your tribe. And sometimes you can use polarization as a way to invoke loyalty with your tribe. I think there's more to gain than to lose from choosing a position that you believe in and being willing to be a bit of a trailblazer and a firebrand.
Welcome to Nonlinear, the podcast about the messy, winding path to doing meaningful work. I'm your host, Saurav Riswood, and in each episode, I sit down with a guest exploring a creative or unconventional career path. Today's guest is Jessy Wu, who's had the definition of a nonlinear career. She started out working in corporate, in consulting and venture capital, but about a year and a half ago, left to do two things: run her own business and write a book. Today, she's successfully done both, running comms agency Encour and writing her debut novel, Good Intentions. Good Intentions is out now, and we chatted about the process of writing it and a lot more in our conversation. Please enjoy. Jessy, welcome to the Nonlinear podcast. Thank you for being here.
Great to be here with you, Sarah.
For listeners who may not know who you are, could you please introduce yourself?
Gosh, you've caught me at the beginning of a new identity. I guess as of today, I am a published author. My debut novel, Good Intentions, came out today on the 30th of June, end of financial year. Previously, I've also been the founder of a communications agency called Encour that mostly worked with technology companies. And before that, I was an investor in early stage technology companies for quite a few years.
Exciting. Congrats on your book release. How does it feel? It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, honestly, it's been such a dream run that we've had. Things have gone really well. It feels like a bit of a fever dream. I'm like, gosh, I hope that my enemies haven't put me in a vat where they've simulated a fever dream and it's going to end tomorrow. That would be a really sophisticated prank. No, gosh, it feels really unreal. It also is interesting because I think so much of our lives now kind of are mediated through a screen. So I've had lots of people like messaging really lovely messages and being really excited over Instagram, and my publisher sending me pictures of the book in Dimmix and in Big W, which is really exciting. But a lot of it doesn't feel quite real because it's not embodied. But I have had a few experiences. For example, last week, Booktopia had me go in and sign 300 copies of the book. And when I walked into the room and turned the corner and saw this kind of pyramid they had built of all of the books looking really beautiful, like that felt incredibly real to me. And I was like, whoa, I did a thing and it's going to be out there in the world now. But yeah, really excited, I think, for readers to start reacting to the substance of it. And I think that it's just the ultimate privilege when you write something that really moves somebody and makes them think about something in their own lives or gives them courage or gives them clarity. I think that's an amazing thing to be able to do as an author. So looking forward to the conversations I have with those readers.
Amazing. And what are some examples of conversations you've already had, or what has resonated from your writing with early readers?
Yeah, I think a big beat is how the beginning of the novel, which is set on a university campus and follows Jake and Nadia as their student journalists who work together at the university newspaper to uncover a really big story. And it renders that kind of heady and hopeful experience of first love and experimentation with intimacy and kind of coming of age together. A lot of readers from, people who are just out of university to people who are my age to much older readers said that they felt this deep sense of nostalgia and this kind of reminiscing about their university days, which was really special for them. And then for the second half of the novel, which is this kind of corporate thriller that sees their lives collide again after 10 years on opposite sides of a career-defining clash, I've had some readers say that, it's really illuminated for them some of the crossroads they've been at in their own lives professionally unfortunately, some of the complicity that they've had to stomach in order to, do the jobs that they have. And it's given them, a sense of companionship through that and galvanize them in some ways, which is, what I really set out to do with the novel. So it's incredible that it's landing.
Yeah, I'd love to chat more about that process of writing the book. You mentioned you started your career in your 20s in a more corporate environment, consulting, VC, and it's from the outside, it can seem like quite a hard pivot to write a book and go into the arts.
Yeah.
Would love to understand how you thought about that decision and what led to you eventually writing Good Intentions.
Yeah, I think it's like I've pivoted so many times that I've kind of come full circle. So English was always my best subject at high school. When I was a kid, I used to devour books from the library. In New Zealand, I think the borrowing limit for each library card was 28 books. And in my family of four, we had four of those, and we would just all max out all of our cards between me and my brother. And I, inhaled, everything, Saddle Club books, Del Toro Quest books. And then, as I was going through high school, I took IB English at high level and had the real pleasure of reading some, amazing classics and being taught those by incredible English teachers. So that's what I kind of thought I wanted to do. And at university, I studied English literature and philosophy. And so, the vast majority of my assessments were writing essays. And I wrote a 20,000 word university honours thesis. So writing has been this thing where I feel like I have done, surely by now I've done 10,000 hours. And it's, something that I received compliments for, that I was a good writer and that people enjoyed my writing and I had a way with words. And I think it was probably a little bit almost by circumstance that in the last year of university, I started to be pulled more in a corporate direction just based on the kind of careers day presentations I attended. Maybe you had a similar experience and ended up as a management consultant and then as a VC investor for, 7 years. But even in those careers, I think writing was the through line. I think that, I'd get like a barely scraping by on Excel modeling. But people would always say, I wrote nice documents, I made nice slides, good horizontal logic and vertical logic. And then as a VC investor, actually you do write quite a lot because you write these investment memos where you're trying to explain, what is an opportunity, how is the world changing and how is this company going to fit into that change. And then in the second VC fund that I was at, I was also kind of leading our content function and writing public-facing investment notes about why we made the investments that we did. So I think I continued to flex that muscle in different ways. And indeed, the insight that led me to start a communications agency after I led VC is because I saw there was a gap in the market for supporting startups to do effective storytelling about what they were building and why it was important and why they, as a team, kind of had, what it took to win.
And as someone who has developed this commercial judgment through all these years of working in corporate and owning your own business, have you noticed any lessons from that time that you can apply to the creative world now?
I do think that publishing probably exists at the intersection of art and commerce, right? Like you have these people who deeply love books and are very sensitive to the things that people are trying to create and render in their books. But at the end of the day, it only works if there are some books that manage to sell a lot of copies. And so, the writer is responsible for what goes in the book and the editor works with them to make that the best that it can be. But then there's a packaging and a publicity that goes around the book and a whole motion to convince a reader to kind of put the book in the reader's mind so that when they walk into a bookstore and they see it on the shelf, they feel a sense of resonance with it and they buy it for, whether it's $18 at Big W or $34.99 at their local bookstore, and they form a connection with it and they sell it. So everything from the cover design to the people that we asked to blurb it and whose names are on the cover, to, you know, how we position the book in the back, to, the way we talk about the book at events and in the blogs that I've written for different booksellers is commerce. And the judgment of how to get people's attention in a very kind of attention deficit disorder world. I think I've been able to lean on my commercial judgment to help me there.
And is there ever a tension when you're writing to think about, oh, I need to write the novel that's going to be or appeal to the widest audience or be the most lucrative, for lack of a better word, versus what you define as art that you want to produce? How do you navigate that tension if you do feel that at all?
Yeah, I do think I'm lucky because I think that there is like a market for the art that I'm interested in, which is, you know, contemporary love stories between intelligent people set against the backdrop of Sydney, rendering these worlds that I've lived in that are otherwise quite opaque. So, you know, tech and finance and investment and journalism, those are industries that people find quite fascinating. So I think there was a really nice kind of synergy there. I do think sometimes as I've been writing my second book over the last few months, I'm like, oh, you know, should I just put this tearjerker in here? You know, should somebody get cancer and die because these tearjerker moments where the audience really like feels all of their feelings is something that seems to be a tailwind for books that have been really popular. Should I just do that? And I kind of have to pull myself back and be like, no, if you're ever doing that because you think that, you know, putting tearjerkers in your book is going to make it sell more, then and you're compromising the art to do that, then that's like a slow path to like creating something that's just pretty garbled.
And so how do your experiences then shape what you write about? You mentioned what you write about is often drawn from what you've done in the past, VC, the corporate world. But how has that shaped both the characters and the plot of Good Intention?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, I've made no secret of the fact that Good Intentions is a rendering of the experiences that I've had through the 20s in both love and in work. And I've taken the insights I've had from being an investor and also being proximate to the media to try to depict those worlds realistically. I think to zoom out, the work of an artist is to have, I think, an elevated level of sensitivity and observation of the world around you. So, you know, when you feel big feelings, I think, ow, that was really painful. But what's the underlying thing here? What's the textured kind of universal thing here that I can try to capture and turn into words on a page that can make other people maybe feel something similar as well. And I do think it's interesting walking through the world with that kind of sensitivity.
And what do you think is the primary function of your writing? I've heard people say that good writing is really good observation and that you take an experience and make it quite real and understandable to someone else, whereas another take might be that good writing is a really good take, like you bring a good perspective on something and you have an opinion that might not be popular but resonates in some way.
Yeah.
Do you look to one of those two models as a way to write, or is there another way that you think about the purpose that your writing serves?
Yeah. It's a take. If you write enough LinkedIn takes, one day one of them will become a novel. No, what do I think about this? I think I read somewhere that really good art is trying to answer a question that the author has that they couldn't answer but through the creation of art. And craft is about making that legible and recognizable to other people so that they can maybe see reflected back to them an answer to something that they've been struggling with. So craft without art is just something commercial, but maybe ultimately absent of that deep feeling. But art without craft has no form and is not legible to other people and maybe helps you with catharsis, but ends up being something that other people can't connect with because it's not been turned into something that they can kind of connect with and digest. So yeah, I think the core of my writing is trying to get to the bottom of something that has been kind of rattling around inside of me. But where all of the craft comes in is trying to make that something that others can connect with, makes them think, makes them feel, makes for an interesting conversation at a book club. Yeah.
And what do you think it is about the fiction form that allows you to express yourself in a way that, say, an essay wouldn't or a LinkedIn post wouldn't? What is it? Is it the distance you get from yourself by creating these characters, or is it something else?
Yeah, I mean, the one of the founding kind of principles of Facebook and Meta is actually this kind of academic theory about form. The medium is the message. I've heard from my friend who works at Meta in quite a senior role that when there's like a new joiners Zoom call, Zuck will preside over it, and this will be one of the slides that he presents. The medium is the message, and the thing is with Meta is they want to own every medium, so they want to own, the Instagram post with a series of images, and they also want to own the reel, and as they push into AI and other things, they want to own, I don't know, AI generated videos and things like that. I think that the medium, so, a 300-page book, 280 character tweet, a longer blog post or LinkedIn post, a 4-minute video, a 30-second reel, they are absolutely the parameters for the kind of message that you can get across, right? And maybe an alternative way to get some of the takes in here across is through a long form blog post, like 5,000 words or something. But there's still limitations to what you can do there, because you can't take people on an emotional journey as effectively through a nonfiction essay. You can't kind of be like, imagine what it's like to be this kind of person and have these things happen to you, and then end up between a rock and a hard place because of forces outside of your control, and imagine what it's like to feel really deeply about this other person who's chosen a different path. And do you see now what I'm trying to say, right? Like, you can't, I think you'd have to be so skilled to be able to do that in a 5,000 word, long form essay, right? And I think that in order to get that message across, I really needed to create a character driven novel where there's a romantic arc and where the two protagonists are two sides of the same coin and live out different theories of change, both as well-meaning people with good intentions and each trapped in their own ways and ultimately have to sacrifice something.
Yeah, it's a great... I hadn't heard that medium is the message thing, so that's a very good way of framing it. I'd love to dig into those first iterations of good intentions when you were thinking about, who are these characters? What is the message I'm trying to get across?
Yeah.
What do the first versions of this book look like?
Yeah, so I think the kind of tagline that I had in my mind, I imagined that if it would get published, it would like be across the front here. That hasn't happened because the tagline's too esoteric, but the tagline I had in my mind was, what is the cost of being unyielding and what is the price of bending too much? And I wanted these two characters to kind of have that contrast where one, and in this case it's Nadia, is more malleable and pragmatic and, comes to believe that in order to make the world better, you should work within the system. You should get into the rooms that matter. You should become somebody who can allocate lots of capital or influence senior decision makers, and you should try to make decisions that make the world a better place. Invest in a clean energy company that helps us to decarbonize, or invest in a medical healthcare company that brings a life-changing treatment to millions of people, right? And then you have this other protagonist in Jake Sullivan who is more rigid, who is more black and white in his thinking, and thinks that working within the system is tantamount to doing a deal with the devil. And in order to change the world, you have to be somebody who holds power to account. And that means being on the outside, and that means critiquing people, and that means doing the hard, muckraking, unglamorous work of exposing where there's been wrongdoing. And if you become a pariah and people call you a crusader and people say, you're somebody who just tears things down rather than builds them, then you wear that as a badge of pride. So these quite different characters in some ways, but who share this deep love at the beginning of the novel because there is something in both of them that wants to do the right thing. So then I think that was the starting point. That was what I wanted to render. And then I kind of created the situation that would allow their two theories of change to be pressure tested. And that was also, entertaining and propulsive. So the very first iterations of the novel were written, I think, in this studio, which was then the Encour office, and beta read by, our former colleagues, Victoria, Daniel, and Angus and Marlene as well, and then really refined in collaboration with those beta readers, and then eventually in collaboration with my agent and my publisher.
Yeah, and it sounds like you had quite a collaborative approach to writing a book. Is that a common experience when you talk to other authors? Because I can imagine there's a model of people who are or are more closed off and treat it as their own sacred art, whereas your model sounds quite collaborative. I'd be keen to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think having talked to a few Australian local authors, I think I'm probably in this slight minority. I've heard more authors say, no, I don't show anyone until draft number 4. I want it to be as good as it can be before I show my agent. Normally my agent is the first person to read it. I don't really use beta readers. For me, I think beta readers has been really helpful. One, as a cheer squad. I remember showing Angus, Victoria, and Daniel the first kind of 6 chapters. And they started hounding me for more. They were like, what happens next? And then so I felt this pressure to kind of continue polishing the chapters that I had written until it was at a point where I felt okay with sharing it with them. And then that really gave me the kind of momentum to just finish it and have a completed product. But 2, I think that, a beta reader helps you to be like, oh, this is the vision, I have it in my head, but you haven't actually said it on the page, and so it's confusing. So I think it just helps you to sharpen and develop and make something that is the best kind of translation of what's in your head and the vision you have with what the reader is actually able to understand.
And what was the process of going from those early drafts to the final version in your hand now? I'd love to hear more about the world of agents and publishing and how that all works.
Yeah, so the way it typically works is if you want to become a traditionally published author, you tend to have to get a literary agent. A literary agent is somebody who, reads really widely, has great taste, great sensitivity to what has potential, and they are the ones who then offers you representation. And after they've done so, champions the book to their network of publishers. So LinkedIn, hallelujah, my guiding light. I posted on LinkedIn maybe in March of 2025, being like, if you've heard from me less recently, it's because I've been channeling a lot of my creative energy into this thing I've been working on, my novel. I think I've got a minimum viable opus, and I'm hoping to see if it can get published. If anyone knows anyone, can slide into my DMs or something. And I was very lucky to have Simon Krier, shout out to Simon, who is somebody who had published my writing previously when he was the editor-in-chief at Smart Company. I'd written op-eds for him. He kind of messaged me and he said, hey, I've had a couple of books out, traditionally published, nonfiction. I have a great agent. I think you two would really get along. Let me introduce you in an email. And then so he introduced me to my now agent, Grace. And I sent her the manuscript as it stood at the time. And she, it took a month, maybe a little over a month to read it. And then called me and said that she really enjoyed what she had read and she saw potential in it. And then we worked on it together for a few months. And then basically this time last year, the start of July, we took it out on submission to different publishers. And we were really lucky to find my amazing commissioning editor, Emma. Emma had been really kind of senior and experienced editor at Hachette for a long time, but had only very recently stepped into a new role at Pan Macmillan as a commissioning editor, which means that she gets to go and acquire works and be the kind of project manager and steward of that work from acquisition all the way through to publication. So she had yet to make her first acquisition of a fiction title, and she wanted that first one to be really special. And Grace, I think, had lunch with her, and Good Intentions, or the name that we shall not share, that it had at the time, felt like something that was kind of up her alley and something that might resonate with her. And then so we sent it to her, and she read it over a weekend and came back that following week, said that she really loved it and she wanted to take it to the book acquisition committee. And then so it all kind of happened quite quickly from there. And yeah, I remember it was a Friday. Harry, who's behind the camera, and I were at a meeting with Stone and Chalk with Paulette, love Paulette. And I said to Paulette, I'm expecting an email, and if I receive it in this meeting, I may freak out. So yeah, just, never mind me. And she was really excited and supportive. And yes, I received the meeting. I received the email during that meeting, and it was truly one of the kind of happiest days of my life for someone to say that they wanted to pay for something that I had written, but also, the kind of road ahead, imagining it getting published. And yeah, it's happened. So yeah, a special day to be recording this podcast.
Amazing. And what did that edit process look like? Was it the product you have today? Is that quite different to what you'd intended to have at the start? And how did working with your publishing house work?
Yeah, so I would say it is different, significantly different from what I submitted, certainly from what I submitted to Grace. I would say that the piece of feedback I got that really drove the changes that I made is they were like, you're really mean to Nadia. Like, Jake and Nadia are these two fractal parts of me. And I think that in Jake, I locate traits that I'm proud of. So he's principled, he's courageous, he has really high integrity, he is stubborn, but he's quite honorable, and he's a good guy. In Nadia, I think I locate some of the traits that I've struggled with more. So she's malleable, she's pragmatic. Some would say she sells out. Some would say she willfully looks the other way, even though she knows something is not quite right, in order to protect herself and her interests. And I've done those things before. And I think I struggled with those things when I was a venture capitalist. And so I think I gave her those traits without that much sympathy and compassion for why she did the things that she did. And the editor was like, she's got good intentions. She does have a reason for doing some of the things that she does. Can you bring it out onto the page more? And can you kind of hold her with more love? And so it actually was a very therapeutic thing to write those additional scenes where I gave greater voice to her interiority. And I think that those scenes really, really fleshed out the novel and made it much better than what it was on submission.
So after writing those scenes for Nadia, did you feel a greater self-empathy, for lack of a better word, with those parts of yourself, or feel less, or feel more proud of those parts of yourself?
Yeah. Write a book. It's great therapy. Yeah, it's parts therapy.
And then on the Jake traits of being, principled, quite bold, you aren't afraid of wading into hot button issues, whether it be, LinkedIn takes or being quite outspoken about what you value and what you believe. I'd love to hear a bit more about that and how you approach, or how you think about having those conversations, and why you think it's important to be outspoken and have your voice heard.
Yeah, for sure. So I think for context, I am somebody who has been deliberate about building a following online, building a personal brand, some people call it. I've, been posting content on LinkedIn quite consistently for, I think, the last 5 years. Initially kind of less combative, more educational resources about, breaking into VC, or how do VCs think about investing in lending companies, or how do they think about investing in dating apps or whatever. And and built a bit of a kind of following through that. And then as I think I got greater confidence in my perspective and in my voice, I started wading, as you said, into issues where there are probably multiple perspectives and multiple sides to be taken. So recently I've been an outspoken voice on some of the proposed tax reforms brought forth by the Labor government about whether we should tax capital gains, and probably ruffled a few feathers in tech. Not everyone agrees with me, but I think that there's also a cohort of people who did agree with me and didn't see that perspective being represented, and were glad to see me putting forth a counter opinion. So this dovetails with some of the things that I kind of advised founders on when I was running an agency as well, which is your vibe attracts your tribe. And sometimes you can use polarization as a way to invoke loyalty with your tribe. And for people who feel very scared of doing that and very scared of being a controversial figure, I always say your detractors can't do very much to affect your life. Like, yeah, sure, they can say mean things about you on the internet, but are they really going to go out of their way to hamstring you? Are they gonna slash your tires? Are they going to badmouth you? Probably not. I think they'll, mostly be apathetic. Whereas if you inspire loyalty with a certain tribe and you have a group of people who really resonate with you and like you and want to support you, then your life can be greatly improved by people who are willing to help open doors, as Simon did when he introduced me to Grace. So I think there's more to gain than to lose from choosing a position that you believe in, and standing against it really strongly and consistently, and showing people why it is that you stand for those things, and being willing to be a bit of a trailblazer and a firebrand. And I must say that it has been this, I think, tailwind in my career. I think a lot of people who ended up working with me and with the team in that comms agency came in because they resonated with the kind of person I was, and the kind of avatar of me that existed on the internet, and thought that I had something to say and could guide people in saying something pointy, but not in a way that gets lots of people offside. And I think it's probably been a bit of a boon in terms of some of the publicity I've managed to land around the book as well.
An irrepressible gadfly, as they put it. And back on the topic of the book, what does success look like for you here? I mean, obviously you'd love for it to be a bestseller, but did you get value in the craft itself of writing the book?
Yeah, absolutely. Got heaps of value in the craft, and became a better writer. So it was like a free, MFA or something. So that was great. I do think, and this might be interesting to your listeners, is, I would love to make a career as a writer, and to try to make that financially sustainable. So, I'm not imagining trying to make a huge amount of wealth through it, but if I can kind of make a salary that allows me to meet all of my material needs, and feel a sense of financial kind of stability, then I would love to be able to be a writer. And I think that the pragmatics of the writing world is that it's hard to make that happen. For it to be sustainable, you do have to write a book probably at least every 2 years, ideally a book a year. You have to get pretty good advances for those books across multiple geographies. If you can get it in 2 markets, you have to maybe sell some translation rights along the way, sell some film and TV options around the way. And if you're able to do all of that, I think you can make it work. But it's tough. So, when this is released, I'll probably be a few weeks into trying to make it work. As an author, I've just submitted the manuscript of my second book. I'll be touring my first book, but I'll be kind of finding opportunities to complement that core writing with writing for literary journals, or writing for newspapers, just to try and make $400 here, $1,000 there, and seeing if I can make it work as a creative, and seeing if I can have an artistic life and a non-linear career. So I'll let you know how it goes.
Have you explored other models apart from, say, traditional publishing? I'm thinking of, say, the Kevin Kelly quote of 1,000 true fans who support your work, pay $100 a year.
Yeah.
I'm curious to understand why you chose the traditionally published route. Was it just, something that made sense and it started snowballing? Or was it quite a conscious decision to go down that route versus the more creator economy style models we're seeing today with paid newsletters or whatever else it might be?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, I think that so Encour indie published 3 books. The Fundraising Blueprint, which is a kind of how-to on how to raise venture capital, and then a crime thriller mystery book, Mr. Muerte, and then a sci-fi collection of short stories by Richard No. Richard is an interesting example where he has an audience. So he has about 85,000 followers on Twitter. He is a AI researcher, has worked at DeepMind and at OpenAI, and is quite a credible voice on those topics, and also already had a following on his Substack as well for his short stories. So there was a lot of success factors in that book. That being said, we published his anthology of short stories, The Gentle Romance, and it sold quite well, but probably less than 2,000 copies. And it actually got an endorsement from Kevin Kelly,
there you go.
who plugged it on his newsletter Recommendo. So probably had many kind of things go right for it as an independently published book, but I do think it's hard to break out of a certain number of books sold just via those channels, because you don't have the apparatus that traditional publishers do. You don't have relationships with bookstores, with a network of bookstagrammers and booktalkers and reviewers and tastemakers. You don't have the ability to do publicity for the book and have it in, magazines and newspapers and stuff. There's just a real limit to how big of an audience your book can reach. And it's hard to get independent books into bookstores, and bookstores is still a big way in which the casual reader discovers a book, right? They walk into their local and they say, I loved Dolly Alderton. I'm looking for, a smart love story. What have you got for me? So I think that I did want my work to reach a large audience, and traditional publishing felt like the right way to do that. That being said, the creator economy, after submitting my second manuscript I think I did it on Sunday night,
a few days ago.
A couple of days ago, I was like, wow, I feel like I have a lot, because I've also put the comms agency on hiatus for the foreseeable future. I'm like, wow, I have a lot of capacity right now. I think the risk of a Jessy Wu podcast is at an all-time high. So we'll see what happens.
Need another outlet.
Or maybe I'll find my 1,000 true fans.
Exciting to see if that ever gets off the ground.
Yeah.
But you mentioned to make a career as a writer, you need to, it's a bit of a volume play, and that you need to be quite consistent with output. Yeah. Do you ever feel that in my first book, I've said what I want to say, like all my creative output has been exhausted, and now you're reaching a bit for what to say next? Have you had that experience at all? Yeah,
definitely. And it's been, I've crashed out a few times, because you're like, damn, like, what if I said the best, most deeply felt things I have to say, and I left it all on the table for the first book, and now I've got nothing left, and the second one's just going to be like a pale shadow of the first. I think that is the challenge as an artist. You've got to find more. You've got to go and go through more pain so that you can find more to say. And I think you've got to improve at the craft as well. I do think that that is why people talk about their sophomore novels, which is the second book, being harder than the first, because the first is the one that you've been writing your whole life. It is these profound things. It's your heart and soul bled onto the page, right? And there's so much excitement, and you have all the time in the world because nobody's kind of breathing down your neck saying, when are you going to submit it? And the second book, sometimes you have to turn around in a year or in 2 years, and you're trying to take those same building blocks and slightly change it, but then you get the feedback that it's a bit derivative or it's a bit too similar, and you're like, what else have I got?
Yeah, because it's tension between because there's
Because
tension between maintaining your style as well, right? Because you don't want to write something completely different, but also
sure.
not saying the same thing again.
I think that's where maybe craft comes in. So, there's a few experiences that I render in my second book that I haven't personally experienced. I've experienced perhaps versions of it, but not kind of the full throated version that I'm trying to render in the book. And I've spoken to friends who've gone through that and tried to deeply understand what it's been like for them and gotten their permission to render some of that feeling into the book. Or you read widely and you try to understand what writers who are able to capture grief or heartbreak or joy or or fear, how they do it in their books, and you try to copy the essence of what they've tried to do. So I think, yes, there's a continual growth required as a writer and to have an artistic life. You can't just stagnate.
And what's next for Good Intentions? Is there any, could we potentially be seeing the silver screen as a pathway?
Okay, so filming this on June 30th. July will be where I'm on tour. So I'll be speaking in conversation with some incredible journalists, actually, across Australia and New Zealand. So my launch is at Glebe Books in conversation with Zara Seidler. And then in Melbourne, I'll be in conversation with Dee Salmon, who's a Triple J host and a fellow author. In Canberra, in conversation with Jasper Lindell, who I actually know from university and who was a fantastic student journalist then. And then in conversation at Chatswood Library for the Willoughby Writers Festival with our former colleague Daniel Cash. And then in August, I'm going to New Zealand and doing something there. And later in the year, I'll be in Brisbane and in Berry for some writers' festivals. So really looking forward to being at all of these different events and seeing old friends and meeting new readers as well. And yes, there's been exciting development where Good Intentions has been optioned for a television series by a local producer of prestige TV dramas. TV happens quite slowly. Lots of things have to line up. But yeah, hopefully there'll be more good news to share there soon.
All the best with all that. Sounds like quite a packed calendar. So excited for you.
Thank you.
And if you had one piece of advice for someone who has a creative side, whether it's writing a book or they want to be a filmmaker, but are stuck in, well, not stuck, but maybe think it's not feasible because they have bills to pay, a corporate job, what advice would you give to this kind of person who wants this kind of creative outlet?
Yeah, I think honestly, be willing to do the work. Writing a novel is hard work. It's 80,000 words, I thought my honors thesis was really hard work and that was 20,000. So it is a really big commitment. And I do hear from people who've written, the first few chapters, maybe they've written 20,000 words, but they've put it into a drawer. So I think that if you're able to finish, if you're able to write 80,000 words, you will be in the top 10% of people who've had a dream to write a novel. A lot of people just don't get through. And honestly, in the last 2 months, I 996'd on my second novel. I was spending every spare brain cell. I was working, 8 hours a day on it really consistently, weekends. Yeah, it's not a frolic in the field. Take it really seriously, want it, do the work. And look, honestly, I neglected things in my life. There were periods of time where I was a pretty bad girlfriend, because I was so absorbed in writing this book, and periods of time where I was writing the book alongside running the business, where I was probably, more absent from the business and my colleagues had to kind of pick up the slack and run at things more independently. So yeah, I won't pretend it's easy. It's not oh, la-di-da, you go to a cafe and the words effortlessly pour out of you and it's just in its raw form, a bestseller. Yeah, it's work. It's work. And I think you've got to enjoy the work to some extent. If you just love the publicity, but you don't like writing the book, I don't know. I don't know about that. I guess you could get them ghostwritten for you. But this book, I've probably, reread it 100 times. I think if you opened the book and read out a sentence, I could tell you exactly what chapter it's in, and what's just happened. You have to read your own work so much. You have to agonize every sentence. I mean, that's the good thing. Yeah. I think you should write what you like, because if you write something boring, you're going to have to read it 100 times. So I don't want to romanticize having an artistic career.
Sure.
I think you've got to really want it.
Well, it's been an amazing conversation, Jessy.
Thanks,
Really
Sarah.
glad to have you on the podcast. We like to end every episode of Nonlinear with 3 questions.
Okay.
The first is, what's one book you think should be mandatory reading at school?
Yeah, so it's a nonfiction book. I read it, I think, last year, and it's called Quit, and it's by Annie Duke, who is a professional kind of poker player and specializes, I think, in decision theory. And it's a book about the decision of quitting, and I guess her thesis is that people aren't very good at making that decision. There are a lot of cognitive fallacies that means we stick at things for too long, and a lot of time and energy is wasted because people don't see the signs for when they should quit and do so at an optimum time.
I'll add that to the list. And the second question is, what's one purchase under $100 that's materially improved your life?
Ooh, you know what it should be? It should be a brick. It should be a brick that is programmed to stop you from texting certain people. I would buy that. No, what
idea.
actually has, I get like really bad knots in my neck and in my shoulders from writing to them.
Keyboard warrior.
Yeah. Oh yeah, from picking too many fights on LinkedIn. Yeah, so I do love the kind of neck massage pillow that I use.
Cool. And last question is, what's one compliment you've never forgotten?
Oh gosh. Okay, this is relevant to my quip earlier about how the risk of a podcast is an all-time high. But I do remember I was in line for Loon in Melbourne with my friend Mond. Shout out to Mond. And we were catching up. We hadn't seen each other for a few months, and we had lots to say to each other, and it was a very kind of energetic, high-octane conversation. And the woman who was standing between us was probably listening to us go on for like 20 minutes because it was a really long line. Good croissants though. And she kind of turned around and she said, "Gosh, you guys are so intelligent. I could listen to you all day." So, maybe the Jessy Wu podcast with 1,000 true fans is somewhere in the next financial year.
Amazing. I'll have to watch out for a competition.
True.
Well, thank you for your time, Jessy. It's been lovely to chat.
Saurav.